Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, rooted in Oakland, no more. As the A's are headed to Las Vegas, not that that's a big surprise. We saw the writing on the wall, but we'll definitely talk about that. Plus, we'll hear from ESPN's Todd McShay, some more breakdowns. This time, it's quarterback related and why it's so important to consistently draft quarterbacks. Your calls and texts will close out the show. All coming up on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, April 21st, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts to get the latest edition of the show as soon as it drops. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, we definitely appreciate you. We appreciate my man Ari at Ari Produces on Twitter. He's making sure we're up on Twitter, or not up on Twitter, but up on YouTube each and every day. He does a fantastic job. We definitely appreciate him, and we appreciate you for checking us out as well. Today's edition of the Locked On Raider podcast is brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/NFL60. Again, use the promo code NFL60 for 60% off, plus free shipping at HelloFresh.com. Now let's go ahead and jump into the news and notes of the day. And, of course, there's a lot of rumors swirling around about what different teams are going to do, what quarterbacks are climbing or dropping down the draft boards. I'm glad it's less than a week away, right? I'm so glad that next Thursday we'll know exactly what the Raiders did in round one, and we'll know what every team in the NFL did in round one. And, of course, when the draft gets done, all said and done by Saturday afternoon or late afternoon, whatever the case may be, we'll know the complete 2023 NFL draft, and we'll be able to talk about the actual players on the team as opposed to speculating who's going to be on the team. But for me, the biggest news and notes that came out of Thursday was the news about the A's. They're rooted in Oakland, all the back and forth about trying to get this stadium done in Oakland at the Howard Terminal. Are they going to build at the Coliseum? And then the news drops really late on Thursday. Some news out of Nevada, the Nevada Indy. That's a newspaper or a little website out here. They said sources confirmed to the NV Indy that the Oakland A's and Red Rock Resorts are closing in on an agreement to construct a $1 billion baseball stadium north of Allegiant Stadium with the support of Governor Joe Lombardo. The Oakland mayor said in a statement that the city of Oakland is ceasing negotiations with the A's and moving forward on alternatives for the redevelopment of Howard Terminal. She said that she's tired of the A's using Oakland as a pawn for Las Vegas, which is not fair, which is something that we've all seen been going on for quite a while, but that has been what's happening. Also, the arrival for the A's pending an agreement on public-private partnership could occur as early as April of 2025 at Las Vegas Ballpark with the team's proposed $1.5 billion 30,000-seat retractable roof stadium on a 49-acre parcel of land near the Strip, scheduled for completion in time for the 2027 Major League season. And that Las Vegas Ballpark that they could play in as early as April 2025, that's actually where their AAA team, the Aviators, play. And it's a fantastic stadium. It is awesome. It's got a swimming pool in it. Just a great venue to go check out a baseball game. And I'll tell you right now, as a guy who lives here in Las Vegas and has been to the Las Vegas Ballpark plenty of times, I'd much rather see the Aviators than the A's. And remember, I'm an A's fan. At one point, all of my favorite teams played in the same parking lot. The A's, the Warriors, and the Raiders all represented there at the Coliseum. And now all three teams that from my childhood are all going to be gone. One said, one way or the other, the Warriors in San Francisco, obviously the Raiders here in Vegas, and now the A's are chasing the tails of the Raiders and headed here to Vegas as well. And I think it's a shame. I really do. I mean, it was kind of the inevitable. I saw the writing on the wall, as many people did, including A's fans that are still in the Bay Area. But first of all, shame on the A's for just giving the A's fans the shaft like they've been doing it in the runaround for the longest, putting out a terrible product on the field. The ownership there acting like they're a poor franchise when they're not. They make money hand over fist, but yet they continue to operate like they're poor. And it's just a shame because A's fans, as I am an A's fan, I know how loyal A's fans are. And I remember the great days of the Coliseum, the A's being there with all the stars and seeing the 3 million plus people packing the Coliseum. As I've said many times on this show, my grandfather, longtime season ticket holder of the A's, I used to go to the A's games all the time. So much fun. Of course, the stadium got turned upside down when the Raiders returned in 95, but still, it was a Beautiful building to watch a baseball game for the longest. Loved all the fan interaction there at the Oakland Coliseum, and loved seeing the good product out there on the field. And that's the biggest thing, is the product hasn't been worth a damn in a very long time there with the Oakland A's, because of the way that the management, the ownership chooses to run things. It's just not fair. And I don't know what they plan on doing once they get to Vegas, because I'll tell you right now, if that's the plan, that they're going to go ahead and continue to stick with that business model, I've said it so many times, it's not going to work here. And I know people think I'm crazy and, oh, you're just saying that because you live in Las Vegas and, you've changed or whatever. No, you have too many options here than to go watch a Wednesday afternoon baseball game when it comes to a bunch of AAA guys, right? And again, I talked about the Aviators. We much rather go to an Aviator game and see the guys that are actually in AAA and start to see them as they're coming up than go pay Major League Baseball prices for a AAA product, right? That's just it. And there'll be a nice draw when the stadium opens up. It'll be a nice draw when the Yankees are in town, when the Dodgers are in town, when the Angels are in town. When certain teams come to town, sure. But consistently, just have that many games that a Major League Baseball season, a homestand holds, or a home season, what is it, 82 games, or no, 162, sorry. So 81 games. There's not going to be the stands packed for 81 games. Again, for the certain teams, sure, right? Giants fans that want to see the Giants when they come to town, sure. Cubs fans. I mean, there's a lot of different fans of different teams here in Las Vegas because there's so many people from out of town that live here. But it's not going to pack that stadium 81 times a year. It's just not. It's not. And that product is going to have to change. And again, it's just a damn shame, especially since the A's are basically a major reason. And I don't want to get into the politics behind the reason why the Raiders left Oakland as well, but the A's had a lot to do with it, right? And so I know that owner Mark Davis isn't happy about the A's headed to Las Vegas and basically just kind of, oh, hey, we're going to do what they do, even though we squatted on the Coliseum grounds and decided that, oh, no, we're not going to let them try to build a stadium here. We can build a stadium for the A's. We can build a stadium for the Raiders. We can build something for the Warriors and have all three teams still playing here. But no, we're going to choose to not do that. That's what the A's did. As a matter of fact, in a statement, you can find it on the Review Journal here in Las Vegas. You can check it out online, of course, at the LasVegasReviewJournal.com. But Mark Davis made a statement. He said, I won't forget what they did to us in Oakland. They squatted on a lease for 10 years and made it impossible for us to build on that stadium. The Raiders owner said that in a phone chat Thursday afternoon, referring to the stadium the A's and Raiders once shared at the Oakland Coliseum. They were looking for a stadium. We were looking for a stadium. They didn't want to build a stadium, and they went ahead and signed a 10-year lease with the city of Oakland and then said, we're the base team. They marketed the team as rooted in Oakland. That's been their mantra through the whole thing. The slogans they've been using have been a slap to the face of the Raiders, and they were trying to win over that type of mentality in the Bay Area. Well, all they did was F the Bay Area. Again, this is from Mark Davis. He said, I have nothing against the players. I was an A's fan way back in the day. Reggie Jackson, all those guys. Reggie's a good friend, but not this management group. No. And that's just a little bit of what Mark Davis had to say to the Review Journal on Thursday when he's talking about the A's coming to Las Vegas. And, a lot of people have hit me up and said, well, I know you're an A's fan. How do you feel about it? I hate it. I really do. Again, I look at that product. I'm ashamed of that product. Just look at what they've done this year, right? You don't even have to be a big baseball fan just to go and pull out the box scores. Look at all the runs. I mean, the team that they're putting out there is nothing. So, and I heard JT mention this on the radio on Thursday, and this would be ideal if they were to come to Vegas and all of a sudden the ownership plan decided that they were going to be worth so much more money once they got here and they got the stadium, and then they decided to sell it to a ownership group that actually wanted to put a good product out there on the field. That would be ideal, but I doubt that that's going to happen. So that was really the biggest news. That was a big conversation point. And Dave Kovel, the president of the A's, all of a sudden he started calling everybody at the radio station. Oh man, he had all his people calling me. Hey, we'd like to get on one of your radio stations. I'm like, well, you're not going on Raider Nation Radio. That's for sure. So they weren't on Raider Nation Radio, but they were on with Steve Cofield on Cofield and Company. Dave Kovel was on talking about the opportunity. So excited now to come to Vegas. Oh, everything's great in Vegas, but just completely crapped on the Bay Area, crapped on Oakland. And again, because they signed that 10-year lease and basically squatted on the grounds of the Coliseum, nothing could get done. So if they were going to just not get anything built anyway, they should have just not signed that 10-year lease and let someone else actually build and stay there, because that was what MD wanted. He wanted to stay in Oakland originally. So, again, I know there was a lot of politics and there was a lot of, things that went on one end and things that went on another end. So, I know that it wasn't all just as easy as well as the A's fault while the Raiders are gone. I'm not going to say that. I would never be that naive. But just realizing that they never really tried to attempt to be, a good partner or work together in any shape, form at all. That's what I can say about the A's. And so I hope that it's already going to be done. But I hope if they do get here sooner rather than later, they change their business plan because, again, that's not going to work here in Las Vegas. It just won't. But that's really all I got for you for segment number 1 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Little news and notes of the day, and not directly related to the Raiders, but is directly related to the Raiders because they made the move to come to Las Vegas. Of course, the Vegas Golden Knights were already here. They were the Vegas's team. They still are Vegas's team as they're in the playoffs right now. But they were the expansion team here in Vegas. Of course, the Raiders came here. Now the A's are trying to, ride their coattails here to Vegas. There'll be an NBA team here sooner rather than later. I believe that'll be an expansion team, so that'll be heavily supported. And this is becoming a big-time sports city. We've got a lot, right? We've got we've got plenty of stuff. We got so much stuff. I'm forgetting it, but the Ignite, the NBA, the G League Ignite team is matter of fact right around the corner from my house. It plays at the Dollar Loan Center. We've got the Silver Knights, which is the little brothers of the Vegas Golden Knights. We've got the Night Hawks. There's all kind of Knights. There's all kind of Hawks. There's all kind of Silvers, and there's all kind of Goldens here in Vegas. But there's so much sports that are going on, and it's just going to continue to grow. And of course, all the fights, the UFC, and all those other attractions are going on here as well. Super Bowl will be here this year. Pro Bowl's been here multiple times. There's going to just be so many different events. College football is going to have their national championship game here sooner rather than later. We just saw, not the NBA, but in college basketball, the Sweet 16 and the Elite 8 were here this past year. So, it's just going to continue to grow. But, that was the big news. The A's agreeing to a deal on that massive the stadium that's going to be a retractable roof, and it's not too far from Allegiant Stadium. Coming up in segment number 2 here from Todd McShay, his pre-draft conference call he had on Wednesday morning. On Thursday, we talked all things defense. Today, we'll talk about quarterbacks, in particular, Anthony Richardson, Hendon Hooker, and why it's important to continue to draft quarterbacks even if you have your guy. That's all coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, and we'll get to that right after I tell you about Built Bar. And I've told you about Built Bar a lot. I've told you about the different flavors that they have and why you should get Built Bar, but there's something exciting coming to Built.com tomorrow. That's April 22nd. I don't have all the details, but the excitement is huge, right? The buildup has been big time. Built Bar, they always are coming up with all kind of creative flavors and new packaging, and they drop flavors and they'll have them there for a minute. There'll be a limited time and you got to go get them. Well, this is another one of those. So they really want you to pay attention, mark your calendars, get ready to head to Built.com Saturday morning, April 22nd. Be one of the first to discover what all the hype is about. It's a brand new flavor. I can't wait to see it. You should be on the edge of your seat waiting to see which one it is, but make sure you have the promo code LOCKEDON15 with you, because when you do pick up your box or a couple of boxes of it, you'll want to use that promo code to get 15% off your order. That's LOCKEDON15, 15% off your order at Built.com. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Wanted to jump into some sound bites. We heard some on Thursday from ESPN's Todd McShay, all things defense, as he had his pre-draft conference call Wednesday morning. Well, I wanted to focus on the quarterback position here as we close out the week. And don't forget, around noon today, Pacific time, we'll be hearing from GM Dave Ziegler at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. It'll be the last time he talks to us until next week's draft. So excited about that opportunity. Of course, I'll bring the highlights of that to the show on Monday, but wanted to let you hear from Todd McShay what he had to say about the quarterback position here in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Now, if you were listening to Thursday's show, you heard me pick Anthony Richardson at number 7 overall on Fitz and Harry's, their mock draft that they had on ESPN National, and I did that because Anthony Richardson fell to me at number 7. I didn't have to trade up. I didn't give up any extra capital, but a quarterback that has the potential to be a big-time quarterback, a big-time franchise quarterback for years to come, just happened to fall on my lap. I just felt like it'd be foolish for me to pass by on him, so I didn't. I picked him, and I know everybody didn't like that. Jason Fitz was not a fan of that, but that's okay. So Todd McShay was asked about Anthony Richardson, and what is it going to take? What will make him or break him when it comes to the NFL and him translating from the college game to the NFL game?
It's what's going to make or break him is where he goes. And I'm not talking about like the talent around him as nearly as much as I am the coaching. I mean, look at Josh Allen, what Brian Daboll did for him in developing him. And remember, you talk about the worst completion percentages of quarterbacks coming out that are going to be first round picks. It's Josh Allen and Anthony Richardson. And Josh Allen was at Wyoming, and Anthony Richardson only 13th start. So there's concern. There were concerns with Josh Allen, and Daboll got with him and developed him and got him, basically utilized him perfectly and allowing him to utilize his mobility as a strength to get out of situations where, as a young quarterback, he couldn't process as quickly as a 5-7 year veteran, right? But also cleared up the picture for him. Utilized like what the throws that he excelled at, and allowed him to play his game. And then he goes and what he did with the Giants last year with Danny Dimes, right? I mean, we were talking about, the turnovers, the injuries, just not taking that next step. And all of a sudden, now the Giants have the quarterback of the future. Daniel Jones, like they just gave him a big deal. And it was 1 year with Daboll. And Patrick Mahomes has always had the tools that Patrick Mahomes has had, but he had a year to sit behind, with Alex Smith, who was willing to coach him and help him. I talked to Mahomes before his second year, and he said, Todd, I literally didn't know how to identify the mic at one point because we never had to do that at Texas Tech. It's like the simplest thing you do, the middle linebacker. And he's like, and I was like, 60% in practice early in my year. He's like, but I had a year to learn and I had a year to develop, and I had a starting quarterback that worked with me. And Andy Reid is another guy. Like, there's only so many Dayballs and Andy Reids in the league. And so it's so critically important that Anthony Richardson winds up in a place where there's patience, and B, there's coaching to work with him, allow him early in his career to utilize his mobility, be himself, do what's comfortable for him, and then work on his footwork and mechanics, work on clearing up the picture for him. He's got he's a very intelligent person. I've done a deep dive. I've talked to their head coach, their offensive coordinator, people on their staff, teammates. Like, he picks things up quickly. It's just he's only had 13 starts. So, like, Shane Steichen, I think, would be a great place for him. Steichen's worked with Jalen Hurts. He worked with Justin Herbert. He's helped develop those guys. I'd love to see him in Indianapolis. I don't know if that's the way they go. I've heard that they maybe prefer Levis over them, and CJ Stroud could be available now. So it'll be interesting to see. But I really hope he winds up in a place where they, A, have patience, and B, have the people in charge, head coach, offensive coordinator, quarterback coach, that can really truly develop him the way he needs to be developed. Because if he is, he's going to be a star in this league. And if he's not, he's going to get chewed up and spit out, and it's going to be really unfortunate to see.
So there's a very detailed answer right there from Todd McShay about Anthony Richardson, and it's all about the fit. It really is. And maybe I'm blind, maybe I'm just riding on faith, but I do feel like, especially with Jimmy G in the mix with the Raiders as a starting quarterback, that if they were to go and get Anthony Richardson, if he were to just happen to fall to him like he fell to me in that mock draft, I think they would have an opportunity to kind of groom him and bring him along slow and not have to force him onto the field and give him an opportunity. And I do think that there's the right people in place to help develop a quarterback. I remember, think about this. I mean, think how many times and how many quarterbacks Josh McDaniels has worked with, including Jarrett Stidham, who a lot of people, even on this very show, said, oh, Jarrett Stidham should be the starting quarterback this year. Just ride with Stidham. Guess who developed Jarrett Stidham? Josh McDaniels. And I know Jarrett Stidham played a lot in college. I get that. He was the guy, as I've said many times on this show, that he was the guy that was, even in high school, was prepping to be an NFL coach. But, I mean, he went to Baylor. That's that Art Briles scheme, right? So that's not something that translates to the NFL. Then he went to Auburn, where the offense wasn't very good. And he still was drafted by the Patriots, and he still was with Josh McDaniels for multiple years. So I could see Anthony Richardson being developed by Josh McDaniels. Like I said, if it fell to them, I would never think that they would just make the move to go trade up to go get him. But if they happen to fall to the Raiders, just like he fell to the Raiders in the mock draft that I was part of, I could totally see them making a move for him. Now, another guy that a lot of Raider Nation is big fans of is Hendon Hooker, and I'm a big fan of him as well. At Tennessee, it was a shame when he tore his ACL. I hated it. I remember that game like it was yesterday. He's a guy that I think would have been a Heisman Trophy finalist. He might not have won, but he would have definitely been in New York as a finalist if he hadn't torn his ACL. So there's a lot of questions about him. He's a little bit older. He's already 25 years old. He's coming off the torn ACL. He's coming out of that Tennessee offense led by Josh Heupel, which is very Art Briles like the Baylor offense that I just talked about when it came to the conversation about Anthony Richardson and Jarrett Stidham. So Hendon Hooker's got a lot against him, and coming off that torn ACL. So here's Todd McShay on Hendon Hooker, if he's a first or a second round guy, as many people are saying.
The round in which quarterbacks have been drafted the least, only 2 times in the last 5 years, is the second round. And the reason is, if you believe and have a second round grade on a quarterback, and it's anywhere like a fringe, early second round, some early mid second round, you try to take him in the first to get that 5th-year option. And with Hendon coming off the November ACL surgery after the injury, yes, he's 25 years old, turns 26 in January of his rookie year, but seeing his improvement year over end and knowing that he's going to have a learning curve in terms of going from that scheme at Tennessee. And I know he played in a little bit more pro style system at Virginia Tech, but not totally pro style. I think that he could use a year, and yes, he'll be 26 going into his first year as a starter, presumably. But to me, I would draft him late in the first if you're a team like Minnesota or a team like Seattle trying to trade back in, because you're going to get that 5th year. And it was phenomenal what the Eagles did drafting Jalen Hurts in the 2nd round and having the foresight to do so and develop him. They wind up trading Carson Wentz. They drafted him in the 2nd round after they just gave Carson Wentz a boatload of money, a long-term contract, and Carson Wentz didn't live up to it. So they had the foresight to do that, and a lot of other teams had him as a 3rd-round pick. But my point is, had they taken him late in the 1st round instead of a pick, 53 overall, whatever it was, they would have an additional year. So they would have been able to do that deal that they just did, which is a great deal for both sides, a year from now, and would have bought them extra time to maybe sign like a Hargraves that they lost in free agency. So it's really important to teams to draft the quarterback that they have in the 1st or early to mid 2nd round in the 1st round, so they get that extra year.
So I found that to be really interesting as Todd McShay was talking about Hendon Hooker, and then he dropped a little nugget there, and I think that's an important little thing to think about. There's very rarely are quarterbacks taken in the 2nd round because you want to get that 5th-year option. If you remember, Derek Carr, 2nd-round quarterback. Jalen Hurts, 2nd-round quarterback. Think about this. Jalen Hurts just signed that massive deal. The Eagles wouldn't have had to sign him to a massive deal if they had traded up and got him in the end of the 1st round instead of waiting to the 2nd round. If they had traded up and got him in the 1st round, then they would have had that 5th-year option. Then maybe they were able to keep a guy like a Hargrave because they have that extra year. So I could totally see Hendon Hooker going in the 1st round, especially coming off that torn ACL. They want to get him and get that 5th-year option, kind of give him a redshirt year so he's not even have to be on the field at all this year. So I don't know what team's going to take him. I mean, very well, the Raiders could take him, right? I mean, depending on what they do, maybe they trade back multiple times and they take him and let him sit behind Jimmy G. I do believe they'll come out of this draft with the quarterback. I just don't know which one it's going to be. But I have no doubt that they come out of this draft coming up on the 27th, 28th, and 29th as they'll have somebody in the mix that they draft coming up. So we'll see who it's going to be. But Hendon Hooker, there's no doubt in my mind, I believe he's going to end up being a 1st-round pick. And I thought that was an interesting nugget from ESPN's Todd McShay talking about very rarely do you get a quarterback drafted in round 2. Finally, the last soundbite that I want you to hear in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast, again, talking about quarterbacks. Here's Todd McShay talking about day 3 quarterbacks. And, Brock Purdy and the success he had with the 49ers a year ago being Mr. Irrelevant, the last pick of the draft in the 7th round. He had that success. So are more teams going to look at quarterbacks later? Well, here's Todd McShay talking about day 3 quarterbacks and if he expects to see teams be more invested in drafting quarterbacks later. And this is a really detailed answer, but a very interesting answer from ESPN's Todd McShay.
I think more and more teams are realizing, you've got to develop quarterback. How could there be a better example than the one I gave earlier with Jalen Hurts? You take him at here, let me look it up. I think I said 53 before. Yeah, he was 53 overall, 2nd-round pick. You had just signed Carson Wentz to a long-term deal. He's your starter. He had that 1 year where it looked like he was going to be league MVP, before his injury. And you still draft Jalen Hurts with the 2nd-round pick. And everyone gave Howie Roseman hell for it. And Howie said, we're going to be a quarterback factory. We're going to major in developing quarterbacks. And it just turns out that Wentz doesn't wind up living up to his contract. Hurts shows up every day with a briefcase. He's literally, I know we say this and it's cliche, he is the first person in the building and the last person out of the building every day for year after year after year. And they see that and they're comfortable dealing Wentz and getting the picks that they got for Wentz. And now they have more draft capital to build this organization. And the payoff was knowing that Hurts is going to put in the time and they're putting a system in that's going to help him, thrive. Why wouldn't you take chances? And listen, 2nd round may seem too rich, but there are plenty, and I mentioned before, 2nd round is the least in the last 5 years, only 2 quarterbacks drafted in the 2nd round. That's the round where teams don't draft them. but there have been 7 in the last 5 years in the 3rd round, 7 in the last 5 years in the 4th round. So teams are starting to realize, like, you can't have enough of these guys. And you're going to find out pretty quickly, training camp, and whether it's practice squad or is your number 3 quarterback, whatever it is, you're going to find out quickly what the makeup is. And San Francisco found out real quickly with Brock Purdy. I mean, look at San Francisco and Philadelphia, what they've done, just turning over quarterbacks, never satisfied. And what they're doing too, and people forget this, by doing that, they're allowed to build the rest of their roster through the draft, obviously, but through free agency, and pay the guys on the defensive side, pay their offensive weapons, because they have the money, because they're dealing with quarterbacks who are on rookie contracts. And so Trey Lance may not work out, but now you have Brock Purdy, and you've brought in a cheap veteran in Sam too. So like Sam Darnold. So that is the formula now in the NFL. There's only, if you look at it, like, how many teams legitimately have a chance to win the Super Bowl next year? And with all those teams, you're going to point to the elite quarterbacks in the league, right? And San Francisco might be the outlier because of how they've done it. But really, it's you. If you don't have one of them, or you haven't built it like San Francisco's built it, you don't have a chance. So keep bringing in quarterbacks, keep figuring out who they are. And if you got to move on from them, move on from them. I would draft a quarterback every other year. That would be my philosophy. Maybe it's not the 1st or 2nd round, but maybe it's the 3rd round, maybe it's the 4th, 5th, 6th, wherever it is. I would draft a quarterback every other year, because eventually you're going to hit on one. You're going to save a boatload of money. You can, like the Vikings right now with Kirk Cousins, 35 years old, 23rd in QBR last year, struggling in big moments last year of his contract. That's why I think they should draft Hendon Hooker. And it's great if Hendon Hooker works out in 2024. But if he doesn't, then you draft another one next year, And I think the same thing for Tennessee. You've got a quarterback in Tannehill who's going to turn 35. His QBR was 24 in the league. He's one of the highest paid quarterbacks in terms of salary cap hits. I think around, I forget, 60 million or something like that. And now you can bring in a rookie quarterback this year, and it's like 4 or 5 million against the cap. So to me, you've got to keep drafting these guys, and eventually you're going to hit on one. And until you do, you just keep drafting. And even when you do, the Eagles thought they did with Wentz. They still drafted Hurts, and now look at the Super Bowl, right?
So interesting where he says he believes that teams are going to continue to draft quarterbacks all the time, even if they have their franchise guy, at least every other year, right? And that's something, if you think about it, isn't that what the Patriots did for the longest? Even though they had Tom Brady, it's like they always had another quarterback that they were drafting. And more times than not, they just ended up flipping them to another team. And that's okay, because you're getting draft capital back, because teams need quarterbacks. Teams need quarterbacks. Teams need quarterbacks. And even though teams don't get to see these guys play consistently, they still are intrigued by what they could be or who they could be. Just like there's reports that the 49ers could be shopping Trey Lance, and there's plenty of people that are like, go get Trey Lance. Why? What has Trey Lance proven that you want to go get him for, right? But because he's a quarterback, because he was drafted high, because he had such expectations coming into the league, there's a lot of folks, including Raider fans, that are like, hey, go get that guy. I wouldn't get him because he's already got a couple years removed from his contract. So he's only got a couple years left before he's going to need a contract extension. He hasn't been healthy. He hasn't been able to stay on the field. I mean, he's got to answer a whole lot of questions. So I wouldn't make a trade for him. That doesn't mean the Raiders won't make a trade for him. I wouldn't make a trade for him. And maybe someone does trade for him this draft weekend. I would not be shocked by that. It seems like Brock Purdy is the guy, but then at the same time, Brock Purdy's injured. Is he going to be able to play next season? Probably not. So is this the opening for Trey Lance to get back into the mix? Maybe. But quarterbacks are always needed. And there's always going to be a team that's going to give a quarterback an opportunity, even if he's not really the best quarterback that they can go get. They'll always say, yeah, but I can turn the guy around. I can make him a good quarterback. Look how much John Gruden believed in Nathan Peterman, right? How many times did John Gruden bring him back on a nice little deal because he believed that he could turn him into something? Now, he obviously never did, but still, I mean, there's always a coach that thinks that they can be the one to unlock that quarterback and make him a really good one. So if you have quarterbacks on your roster, at the very end of the day, you can flip them if you have to. So that's all I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Just a little bit of breakdowns from Todd McShay, talking all things quarterbacks, Anthony Richardson, Hendon Hooker, and later round guys. Coming up in segment number 3, your calls and texts, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raiders podcast voicemail line. This is the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation, segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts, you have that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start things off with Vader Raider. He's calling to talk about the news of the A's heading to Vegas. Here he is, Vader Raider.
Q, Raider Nation. It's your boy, Vader Raider. Q, unrelated to football, I kind of wanted to get your thoughts. Maybe you could share them about the news that broke yesterday or this week that the Oakland A's have turned down the Howard Terminal Ballpark offer, and they have accepted the $1 billion offer in Vegas. So, and the site is apparently mere minutes from Allegiant. So, just want to get your thoughts of having, well, at least I'm guessing for you as well, our two favorite teams back again together. Conceivably in the same city. Just wanted to get your thoughts on that. All right, Raider Nation, have a great week and a great weekend. Vader Raider, out.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. And yeah, I talked about that in great length in segment number 1. Again, I hate it for the city of Oakland. I hate it for the fans. I really hate the product that the management company has put out there on the field consistently. Fans don't deserve that. The faithful A's fans definitely don't deserve that. And that business plan, as I mentioned in segment number 1, that ain't going to work here in Vegas. So you better change your business plan if you plan on coming here. But again, that's up to them to do. We'll see how it all shakes out, but they could be playing here as early as 2025 in Las Vegas Ballpark. Up next, got a text from Mike in Valencia. It says, hey, Q, this is Mike from Valencia. I got to say that my boy put me onto your show. My biggest regret is I didn't listen to him sooner. I just want to say I appreciated your breakdown of Budda Baker and Devin White's reasons why they both were requesting a trade. I definitely learned something that I'll take into the next offseason with regards to why a player is really asking for a trade. That's Mike in Valencia. And yeah, there's no doubt about it, Mike. I appreciate the text, my man. Thank you for checking out the show. And yeah, when veterans start asking for trades, especially in the offseason, just look at their contract. Look how many years they have left on their deal, if any, right? They always are going to want more money. That's what it is. It's usually always a contract dispute is why they're asking for a trade. That's why Lamar Jackson asked for a trade. He doesn't want out of Baltimore. He just wants his money. You know, Devin White, he doesn't probably necessarily want out of Tampa Bay. He just wants his money. Budda Baker, same thing. They always want their money, right? It's so funny. John McClain told me something years ago that I'll never forget. I asked him about a player, and he gave me an answer. And then I asked him about another player, and he gave me an answer. And this was years ago. And I asked him about another player, and then finally he just stopped me. He goes, Q, let me tell you something. It's always about the money. They'll tell you it's never about the money. It is always about the money. And he told me as well, his other great advice he gave me when it comes to covering the NFL, players always perform in contract years. He said, don't get fooled by players in contract years. And it's funny, when you think about it, Josh Jacobs had the best year of his career last year. What was it? A contract year. Now, do I think that Josh Jacobs could be that dude every single year? Absolutely. But you saw the first couple years in his career, right? He was banged up. He was missing games, right? He wasn't available all the time. And then all of a sudden, the fifth-year option doesn't get picked up. He's going to be a free agent after the year. He plays in every single game and leads the league in rushing. Again, big Josh Jacobs fan, so I'm not doubting him, but it's no coincidence when players have their career years in contract years. Two great pieces of advice or great little nuggets that John McClain, who's been covering the league for almost 50 years, gave me a long time ago that I will always hold on to tight. So, Mike, thank you for the text. And, again, welcome to the show. I'm glad you're able to check it out. Next up, got a call from ABA Ivan Davis. He's calling to talk about my ESPN mock draft and talk about the pick I made of Anthony Richardson over Christian Gonzalez. Here he is, ABA Ivan Davis.
What's up, Q? This is ABA Ivan Davis, calling to respond to your pick on the ESPN mock draft. I don't care what nobody say. That was the correct pick that you should have made. It should actually, even though Gonzalez was on the table, there should have been no debate. Very few opportunities do you get to draft a generational, talented quarterback. I'm not going to say type quarterback because he doesn't have as much experience as one would want. Matter of fact, that was probably why he dropped to 7. Because if he'd have had any kind of experience, 2-3 years in the SEC and dominated it with that talent, we're talking about Richardson as the number 1 pick. That's how I would see it. But the thing that I like is his work ethic. When you got a generational talent that's willing to work as hard as he say he gonna work, and then there's evidence that he does work like that, even though you might have to wait for it, it's better to wait for it a year or two and go on multiple Super Bowl runs than to not have him on the team at all. I mean, yeah, Gonzalez would have been a great pick, but then that's when if you want the other quarterback in Mississippi State, you trade back up into round 10. I don't know what you got to give up to get that. I don't know if that's possible. Probably next year's first, but that's the Caleb draft. Okay, and so you're just going to have to take a cornerback or something with the round 2 pick. But anyway, I would take that chance. Richardson is the only thing that would mess up, because I would go with the corners also, but Richardson is the only thing that would mess that up for me. For the fact that if he all of a sudden fell to 7, I would have to change my pick. And this is the one scenario that would exist, and it looks like you did the same thing. So hell of a job, Q. I don't care what nobody say, man. I'm in your corner. All right, go Raiders.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. Appreciate you as always. And, yeah, I mean, the thing about it is why I thought it was a great trade or a great move is I didn't have to trade, right? I thought it was a great pick because I didn't have to move up. I got a quarterback that could potentially be a big-time quarterback, and you don't know. He's got as much chance to be a big-time quarterback as Bryce Young or C.J. Stroud or Will Levis or Hendon Hooker, right? They all have the same opportunity to be a big-time quarterback. They've got to go out there and prove it. But he's got the build. He's got the athleticism. He's got the work ethic, right? I mean, there's a lot to like. He's just got to try to figure it out. And if you're only using one draft pick, even though it's a first-round pick, if it doesn't quite work out, at least you don't feel bad that you invested a bunch of draft picks to go get him, to move up and go get him, and then he doesn't work out. That's when I'd be sick, right? You give up 2 or 3 picks, and then all of a sudden the guy ends up being a bust. You're like, well, that sucked. Could have got 2 or 3 good players. I mean, look, the Raiders still have 11 draft picks. That's why, again, it made sense to me. So thank you so much for that call. Appreciate you. I just got time for a couple more. Here's a long text from New York Old School Raider. Say, yo, Q, New York Old School Raider again. It's draft season. There's a lot of smoke being blown out there. If I were Ziegler, I'd want every team to think we want a quarterback. Then we're at number 7. We trade back 3 to 4 spots. Then we trade back a second time to the mid-teens. There are 4 quarterbacks, 5 cornerbacks, 5 DNs, 3 offensive linemen, 2 defensive tackles that are worthy of first-round picks. With the 2 trade backs, we get 2 more day 2 picks, bring our total up to 5 on day 2. We should end up with our top needs filled: cornerback, defensive end, linebacker, safety, tight end, offensive line. Unless one of the top 2 defensive tackles fall to us in round 1, we don't take a D tackle till day 3. Day 3, we play Noah's Ark and start doubling up defensive on positions and draft a quarterback prospect. We doubled up on 3 positions last year. Don't give up on those 2 D tackles. Remember, it took Richard Seymour his second season to start producing. Homegrown depth. That's what we need. Q, better take a closer look to that man on your shoulder saying, draft me, draft me. It's not Anthony Richardson. It's little Richard screaming, good golly, Miss Molly. Any GM that spends a top 10 pick on a quarterback that only has 13 college starts with some major flaws is boo-boo the fool. I know we're in Vegas, but we can't afford to roll the dice. Build it right. Your thoughts, Q, as always, just win, baby. Raiders. Very lengthy text there from New York Old School Raider. Thank you for the text. And, well, I guess I went against your rules. I guess I'm boo-boo the fool because I went against your rules, and I picked Anthony Richardson at number 7 in Fitz and Harry's mock draft on ESPN, and I felt comfortable with that. I didn't trade up for him. I just sat there at 7, and he fell to me. It was him or Christian Gonzalez. Devin Witherspoon was already off the books, or off the board. So I went with Anthony Richardson and felt good about it. Still got 11 draft picks to go and address the defense, like you said. There's been plenty of people that has told me, oh, well, you know, cornerback is deep. You don't have to go get one right away. And so I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to roll with that advice, and I'm going to go ahead and get the quarterback, and I'll get a cornerback a little bit later. But I like your breakdowns. I understand where you're coming from, and we'll see how it all shakes out next week. But I felt comfortable taking Richardson at number 7. So thank you so much for that text. Appreciate you. It's good to hear from you. Up next, got a call from Highlight Hendo from Sacramento, California. He's calling to talk about the upcoming draft, the mock I did with Fitz and Harry, and what he thinks the Raiders really need to do as far as the order of operations. Here he is, Highlight Hendo from Sacramento.
Yo, what's up, Q? Highlight Hendo out here from Sacramento. Man, we're coming up to the draft, and it feels like we might be doing something serious over here. And after listening to your mock draft with Fitz and Harry, and I'm excited to hear the mock draft coming out with the Locked On NFL. But man, for real, I just gotta say what you kind of brought up there with Anthony Richardson being a Florida quarterback and Josh McDaniels having that last Florida quarterback and some bad juju. Man, you could say bad juju again because that sounds like some bad juju. But on the real, man, I really think that focusing on the defense in this draft take that best defensive player available, get a later round QB. It's not that serious, kind of that later round QB is more of a backup, kind of a Chase Garber's replacement if Chase is going to be on the practice squad. So, I mean, really, we need sustainability in the defense. We need guys with long-term contracts before we go ahead and sign somebody like Anthony Richardson. We need to make sure that we have homegrown talent or players that want to be Raiders and play for the Raiders in this system for at least a few years. I mean, we need at least 2-3 year contracts for the majority of the defense and pay them well before we go ahead and sign a quarterback and try and just kind of, it seems like we're trying to force it that way and just trying to push through, and we're going to struggle and kind of end up like the Niners going through quarterbacks like it ain't nothing. Just 1, 2, 3, bam. And then what happens when you get to the AFC playoff game and all 3 of your quarterbacks are gone? That's I don't want to end up like the Niners, and they had a great defense. So, I mean, I feel like that says a lot. So, with all this opportunity here, let's get some defense up for years to come, just like they said. Right on, Q. Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for the call, my man. I'll tell you that I'll be glad when the draft is over, right? We could talk about who the Raiders selected and what they bring to the table instead of maybe they do this, maybe they do that. Why didn't they do this? They should do that. I'll just be glad to be able to talk about what they exactly did. It's hard to make the right decision. Again, I went with the quarterback pick. It wasn't a big move as far as I was concerned. It fell to me at 7. And I said, you know what? Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good. So I'm going to go ahead and roll with Lady Luck and just took Anthony Richardson. I know that, with the Raiders having Jimmy G, he can start right away. Richardson is not forced into action. But then I also know that Jimmy G is an injury-prone quarterback. So at some point, maybe he does pick up on the speed of the game, and he's able to go in there and play. I think he'd provide a lot of juice. I think the fan base would be super excited to go out there and see him perform. That'd be another thing. But we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out. Again, the good thing is that was just my mock draft or the mock draft on Fitz and Harry. So I'm not making any calls. So, I mean, you can say what you want to say about me. It doesn't really matter. But thank you so much for that call. Next up is a text from Jersey Raider. Q, what up? Jersey Raider, just a quick question. Hopefully you can answer it for me. I've heard you say a few times when talking about drafting one of these quarterbacks in the upcoming draft that if they were to pick a quarterback, they can come in and sit behind Jimmy for a year or so. I guess my question would be, what if, say, Richardson came in and just tore it up in the offseason and preseason and just looked better than Jimmy G? Would they still sit him for a year or throw him out there and see what the hell happens? That's Jersey Raider. Thanks for the text. And that sounds very Derek Carr-like, right? Derek Carr was drafted in the 2nd round. Matt Schaub was supposed to be the quarterback, and Derek Carr stole the job in preseason game number 4. Right, Matt Schaub had a dead arm. Derek Carr went in there and shined against the Seahawks starters for about, I don't know, a drive or two, and he ended up becoming the starter, and he never looked back. He was a starter from day one. So I guess Anthony Richardson or any other quarterback that they grab could do that, but I just think that they'll really roll with Jimmy G, especially after giving him the contract that they gave him. So I think that he's pretty much in line to be the starter, but you never know with Jimmy G and his injury history how long he'll actually be in that starting lineup. So thank you so much for that text. Finally, get a call from Mr. Pigface in Salt Lake City. He's calling to talk about my pick on Fitz and Harry and how I made him mad with the pick. Here he is, Mr. Pigface in Salt Lake City.
Yo, this is Mr. Pigface from Salt Lake City, Utah. Q, your pick made me mad, man. Why would you pick him? I mean, like, I agree with those dudes that you put on the other day. You're rolling the dice. That's what the Raiders been doing. Just like, you're not picking the proven guy. You're just going to pick this guy because he says he has hard work ethic. Because you think he has work. Everybody says that. We want proven guys. We want dogs, alpha dogs. You've been talking about it this whole time. And then you make that pick. You're literally like, what? You're literally going against what you've been saying. Get the best talent available. And I'm pretty sure the Raiders, they're going to go defense, I believe, on the seventh pick. The best player available, best talent, the proven guy. We're not going to roll our dice on some dude that you think is going to be the guy. Man, your pick kind of made me mad, man. That was just, you're fired, man. You're not GM no more, man. All right, peace.
Thank you for the call, my man, and sorry for making you mad. Right? I mean, sorry I made you mad. That's sure not what I was trying to do. Not trying to make anyone mad. I didn't know if I was going to I wasn't trying to make anyone happy either. I was just trying to make the best pick, whatever I thought was the best decision. And again, if I had to trade up for the quarterback and give up extra draft capital, sure. Then I can understand, like, okay, that was probably a bad decision. But since I didn't have to, since he just fell to me at number 7, I'm good with that. And the thing you say about the work ethic, it's kind of, I don't know, man. It doesn't make me mad. I mean, again, it's just your opinion. I appreciate it. But I don't believe that everyone says that they have a strong work ethic. Matter of fact, I don't know anyone that doesn't have a strong work ethic that says they have a strong work ethic because they don't think it's an important, like, trait. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, think about it. When's the last lazy person that you ever heard say, I got a strong work ethic? I don't necessarily ever hear that, right? And maybe I'm running in the wrong circles. Maybe people say it all the time. I don't ever hear that. The people that tell me that they have a strong work ethic are people that have a strong work ethic. Like, I talk about it all the time, and I guarantee you I ain't lazy, right? I talk about it all the time. So when I read and I hear from people that cover Anthony Richardson that his work ethic is insane, that he's ready to get after it, and then he writes the piece like he did in the Players Tribune and talks about his work ethic and says, I won't be outworked. I'll definitely get in there. Whoever drafts me won't be disappointed. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. I can relate because I was that guy at one point that said, hey, I'm going to do this. If just given the opportunity, I'm going to do it. Just give me a little crack. I was that guy. Just give me a little way to get in the door. You ain't got to open the door all the way. Just kind of crack the door a little bit. I'll kick it down. And that's what I did. And that's what I think Anthony Richardson could do. So maybe it's just me, but I can relate to what he said. So I actually believe him more than you're giving him credit for. And maybe you're right at the end of the day. Maybe he ends up being a guy that gets drafted and is a lazy dude and is out of the league in 2 or 3 years. If he is, and that's the case, I'll come back and say I was wrong. I got a better feeling than that. And again, I don't know too many people that are lazy that talk about how strong their work ethic is. But again, that's just me. So thanks for the call, though. And again, sorry to make you mad heading into the weekend. Hopefully you're not mad too long. All right. Hopefully you shouldn't be mad, especially after something I said. Just have a good weekend, man. Enjoy it with your family. It's not that serious. But that's going to do it for today's show. We'll end on a high note like that. We're going to go into the weekend. Have a fantastic weekend. Dave Ziegler will be talking to the media around noon Pacific time. It's going to be streamed on Raiders.com on their YouTube page, so you can check that out. But, of course, I'll bring the highlights of it to the show on Monday as well. And whatever news and notes I can gather over the weekend, I'll do that. And we'll have plenty of good conversation here on the Locked On Raiders podcast, including your calls and texts. So that'll all come up on Monday's show. We'll be a couple days away from the start of the draft, and I'll be in Kansas City on Tuesday. So that should be a lot of fun as well. So until then, Raider Nation, have a great weekend. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.